Imagine curing a toothache by shoving a large toad into your mouth, or reviving a drowning victim by blowing smoke up there. You know what. Humans have tried some bizarre things in the name of health, and this only scratches the surface of what we're going to get into today. I'm Jay, a registered nurse, and I am fascinated by both health and history. Ancient remedies, Viking cures, medieval mishaps, this is full of them. What are your thoughts on goat cheese? Personally, I love it. This first person loved goats so much that he started taking the testicles of goats and implanting them into men. We'll call this one the quackery of John Brinkley. John was self-proclaimed medical expert and a very, very charismatic marketer. But the good thing about him is he pioneered something called xenotransplantation. This is taking organs from animals and putting them into humans. His organ of choice was testes.
A form of medicine found in any textbook.
I highly doubt it.
Did you learn it in school?
Of course not.
Then how do you know it works?
John started this practice around the 1920s in Kansas, and he started having clinics all over the US. So why was he doing this? Well, low-key, I think Brinkley might have had a fetish with goats. But anyways, he started to notice how goats were very sexually vigorous, was the terms he used. So he thought if you transfer some of their sexual organs into men, those traits would transfer over. Despite the fact of this having zero medical evidence, thousands of men underwent this risky procedure.
My wife just gave birth to our first child. I am living proof
That the goat glands in my scrotus are working.
I'd show all of you right now if the ladies weren't present.
Many ended with life-threatening infections and chronic pain and severe complications. Of course, at this time, sterile surgical procedure was not really a thing, so many died from sepsis and infections. Many had organ rejection because this was a foreign organ in the body. He knew nothing of this at the time. So you probably guessed it, but that man lost his license to malpractice, had many lawsuits. So in today's modern world, we've swapped goat testicles for trendy supplements with people claiming to offer vitality and energy and the fountain of youth, even though there's not a ton of medical evidence to back this up. So instead of drilling your gonads, now we're going to drill into your skull. The next one is called trepanning, which involved drilling or scraping holes into the skull to release evil spirits, relieve pressure, or cure ailments. The interesting thing about this one is it's a very ancient practice that's observed all over prehistoric Europe, ancient Africa, South America. It wasn't just one area of the world doing this, it was all over the world, which is really, really fascinating. At the time, there wasn't anesthesia, there wasn't antibiotics. They just freaking took a flintstone and... Studies suggest that survival rates from these trepanation procedures was actually greater than 80%. First, I don't know how they got that number. Second, how is that even possible? That's insane. The oldest known skull that was drilled into was over 7,000 years old. Today, we still do craniotomies, which is the surgical opening of the skull. So this is very, very interesting that they were doing this years ago. So instead of offering water or ibuprofen to your girlfriend when she's complaining of a migraine, grab the drill. If drilling a hole into your skull doesn't make you queasy, then the next Egyptian contraception method just might do that. The ancient Egyptians had a strange form of contraception, and it was crocodile dung mixed with honey. They would mix up this concoction and literally stick it up there. They thought this worked as a contraceptive method. Maybe it altered the pH, probably led to a ton of infections. Think about the smell, the taste. Oh God. I also have a fascination with like the royal and nobility history. So let's go into that. So Chinese emperors believed that mercury elixirs could grant immortality. So this was primarily practiced by Chinese emperors in the 200s era BC. They thought that these elixirs of immortality were consumed to achieve eternal life.
He became obsessed with immortality. They made him special pills containing mercury. These would eventually kill him.
These people ingesting all this mercury started having tremors and seizing, mood swings and memory loss, and eventually death. This is mercury poisoning. So ironically, instead of living forever, often these emperors were dying young. Leech therapy, the OG detox method. Forget your detox teas, we're gonna throw some leeches on your body. So European royals used leeches to suck out excess fat and blood. They applied these all over the body, usually the abdomen and arms and legs, places they didn't want excess fat. At this time in the world, they believed in these different humors, and blood played a big role in some of their belief systems. They thought that getting rid of this bad blood from the leeches could restore health, energy, and beauty. And they thought that the less blood you had, the lighter you would be. So it's literally just the volume of blood in your body. They thought that this would help. So instead of your weight loss clinic giving you Ozempic, they would just have you walk into the swamp with Shrek. Then you just slap some of these freeloaders onto your body. You know that leeches are still used a little bit in medicine still today, mostly in like reconstructive surgery, but very fascinating that they're still used. I guess it could be a symbiotic relationship. These people, I tell you, they love their poison, and so did Queen Elizabeth I. She famously used ceruse, which is a mixture of white lead and vinegar. They used this to achieve the paley ghost complexion. At the time, pale skin complexion was sought after. It signified wealth and beauty, and it also signified the fact that you didn't have to be outside. You didn't have to work outside. It's kind of funny because the opposite stands true today. Everyone wants to be tan and underneath the sun. She took this ceruse and would apply it to blemishes and scars, and obviously prolonged use of lead would cause hair loss and rotting teeth and skin damage. You're putting this on to cover up your blemishes, but it's only creating more blemishes. And so they'd cover on even more. Vicious cycle. During the Elizabethan era, this trend was all over the place. This was the makeup. This is how they dressed themselves. The Queen's dramatic use of ceruse actually earned her the nickname the Virgin Queen, and she was iconic for this ghostly pale face that she always had, and it was because of this lead poisoning. She wasn't just slaying her look, she was slaying her body. A killer complexion, really. Literally. And speaking of royals and extreme beauty, King Charles II was sipping on something just as bizarre. Powdered skull cocktails. King Charles II had what he called royal drops, and this was alcohol mixed with powdered skull. Yeah, human skulls. So this little tincture they thought would boost your health and immunity. And during this reign in the 17th century, a lot of people believed in corpse medicine, which was using pieces of other people's corpse to heal ailments. So consuming the vitality of the dead could help. Apparently he always had these royal drops on hand anywhere he went. He was never without his powdered skull alcohol. Blood bathing. Wow. Countess Elizabeth Bathory allegedly bathed in virgin blood to maintain youth, a mix of legend and horror. So this woman, a 16th century Hungarian noblewoman, was known as the Blood Countess. So she was accused of bathing in blood of young virgins to maintain their youth and beauty. So at the time, blood was thought to contain life-giving properties, and so by bathing in it, she believed it would preserve her vitality. It is rumored that she tortured and killed hundreds of young women, which led to her imprisonment in 1610. But there's some controversy. This could all just be some drama to get her canceled. Historians think that this might be fabricated and at least exaggerated by other noble women, maybe who are jealous or just for political reasons, made up these stories about her. I think that this draws a lot of parallels to today's modern anti-aging industry, some of the extremes that we go to. One of the most fascinating medieval cures was having a toad cure your toothache. Little backstory, in the medieval times, they for some reason thought that toads were these like magical creatures. Hence the story of a princess kissing a toad. Because this toad had mystical magical properties, they thought that this would draw out the toothache. The truth is, you were just exposing your body to more bacteria and issues, probably making it worse. Absolutely fascinating. An unsettling image that probably every person has seen is the plague doctor mask, and developed in the early 17th century. They started using this with outbreaks of the bubonic plague, especially in Europe during the 1600s. And now every depiction of the Black Death, they use this plague doctor mask. There was this belief at the time that miasmas or bad air caused diseases. So this huge beak in the front, they would stick a bunch of aromatics and herbs and spices in vinegar-soaked cloth to combat these miasmas, even having the glass eyes to protect from the bad air. So this was essentially the first version of PPE. The bacteria causing the disease was actually carried by rats. Well, actually the fleas that were on the rats. Did this gear really work? Probably not. It's actually crazy how far our understanding of disease prevention has come over time. Now we're getting into one of my favorite parts, the Vikings. The Vikings did some insane, weird stuff. One that I think a lot of these Viking shows do a good job of portraying is the magical mushrooms. One of their uses was before battle, they would take these magical mushrooms to try to get them into this berserker rage. It is described as this rage where you feel no pain and you're displaying superhuman strength. Anthropologists and historians think that this altered state was induced by consuming Amanita muscaria, which is a type of mushroom with psychoactive and hallucinogenic effects that sometimes can lead to heightened aggression. So that's where they experienced this berserker phenomena. On top of this, they were probably drinking some form of alcohol, which only further induced this weird trance-like state. To be clear, a lot of Vikings history isn't totally exactly known what's true and what's not, because a lot of it is derived from these storytelling sagas. Super fascinating. This one's not as much about health, but it is a disturbing piece of human history, and it's one of their ways of executing people, and it's called the blood eagle. What they did was they would cut the victim's back open along the spine, and the ribs were separated and pulled outward, forming a shape that looked like wings. And then they would drape the lungs over the ribs. So they had these ribs spread out so it made a wing-like thing, and they called this a blood eagle. Another fascinating part of history is fish oil. Vikings would have never got vitamin D if it wasn't for their consumption of liver oil. Think about where they lived. They lived very far north, probably did not get a lot of vitamin D, but still they were strong and they grew well, and they didn't have rickets. Rickets is from vitamin D deficiency, and somehow they evaded it. And we now know that it's from their heavy consumption of cod liver oil. Imagine that you're drowning and you wake up to a doctor literally blowing smoke up your butt. For some reason, they thought that tobacco smoke inside your butt would warm the body and make your respiratory system restart after drowning. A lot of the riverbanks and areas near water actually had these like smoke inhalation bellow devices that they would put inside people's rectums if they were drowning. They also used it for colds and hernias and just several different things. So now the phrase blowing smoke up your ass literally comes from this. When you think of deception or insincere flattery, you say, oh, they're just blowing smoke up my ass. Like, that's what it comes from, because now we know it doesn't do anything. Another weight loss method that we have to talk about is the tapeworm diet. So during the Victorian era, they would give them these tapeworm pills, which were a bunch of tapeworm eggs inside this pill. What's interesting is this actually persisted all the way to the 20th century. Of course, never do this tapeworm diet. It's disgusting. One of the more recent ones that's still crazy is the lobotomy. This was popularized in the 1930s, and what they thought was happening is that they could stop mental illnesses by severing the brain connections in the frontal lobe there. Had debilitating side effects and ruined several lives. It's actually a super dark chapter in medical history. The dude who was doing this, who started this, was a Portuguese neurologist who actually won a Nobel Peace Prize for this in 1949. In 1946, they started doing this ice pick lobotomy that was inserted through the eye socket and was less invasive. In the 1940s and 50s, lobotomies were a widespread treatment, and what they were noticing is patients coming out of this were calmer, but what was really happening was emotional blunting and cognitive processing. There was extreme cognitive decline because they were just losing their prefrontal cortex. You know, they had no personality. They weren't the same person they were before you took that piece of their brain out. History is full of strange, bizarre, disturbing, and just fascinating things that humans have done, but it is a reminder of how far that we've come. Y'all, thank you so much for watching, and please, I beg you, if you like this, you have to hit the like button right now. YouTube's telling me that this video is going to be your next favorite one, so watch it here. And this one too. Subscribe. Bye.